going to be recorded and go on our new YouTube channel, which is under OO Organic. And you're welcome to share this information with other people if they are so interested. My name is Gay Timmons. I own OO Organic and founded it 20 plus years ago now. And I've worked in the organic industry for about 30 years, and I've worked with regulatory for a long, long time because I had to learn what the laws were. So today I want to talk somewhat briefly. We don't need to get into this in depth, but I wanted to go over this basic thing, and I wanted to solicit any kind of feedback. I'm very interested about the experience other people are having. I just wrote an editorial blog, which is my opinion of the fact that I believe the retailers are being somewhat irresponsible by not harmonizing their definitions of all these words that are being used. And I think that it was bound to happen. It is what happens when an industry evolves. And if you read my blog, it goes into the history of the organic industry for the organic food development of that regulation. And it's a very good example or model for how we might standardize what we're doing in terms of definitions. Fundamentally, it was based on taking a philosophical commitment, which I think most people in the indie beauty space have, and translating it for the organic food industry into an actual regulation, which was a big challenge. We don't have to go that far, and I don't know that we want to. I think there have been some concerns about the fact that the organic industry is regulated. It's stabilized the industry for sure, and it makes everybody protected as a consumer, but it does present other challenges, especially as concepts evolve, because government is not as flexible and adaptive as a non-regulated situation may be. So today, all I have, this is really simple. I would, number one, read my op-ed piece on ooorganic.com, and there's a pull down to the blog. And I can send you a link if you need it. And then what I have here is this chart, and there are other retailers, but basically this morning I sat down and I went through these 6 retailer sites, and I did everything I could to find whether or not they had a published, clear description of their expectation and their definition of things like clean or green or whatever it is they're using these days. I think almost everybody is moving to clean because it's one of the few things that is not regulated or it's not described in law anywhere. Green is to some extent, the FTC has the green guide. So conceivably, if you call your product green and it doesn't meet the green guides, somebody could call you out, I guess. I don't fully know. Regardless of that, I think we do need to somehow stabilize these things. So if you look at what I've done is, this is by no means comprehensive, but it's a good start, I think, of looking at the criteria, some of the criteria that are examined. So you can see across the top, I have these 6 wholesalers or retailers, and down the side, I have description. This is just a sort of a general comment from me. What they do with regards to a blacklist, what they do with regards to fragrance. Do they have a stated policy on animal testing? Which I have parenthetically. It's illegal in California. Most people ban it, and it's banned by virtue of the law. So there is a regulatory underpinning there, at least for the state. And I think some of the other states are starting to do this. I think they're about to do it in New York, or they did do it. Whether or not the animal ingredients can be derived from animals. Do they have a stated policy about GMOs or GMMs? Do they have a stated policy about petrochemicals? Do they have packaging criteria? Do they have some kind of policy around the kind of pigments they use? And do they address the issue of non-biodegradability, which speaks to things like plastics? And a lot of chemicals are actually plastics, so they never go away. So I'm not going to just call it plastic. So Credo, I think, has been at this a long time in terms of actually writing things down. And I really like the fact that they at least have written it down. They have an extensive series of sites you can go to, and then if you go to the page that talks about the Credo Clean Standard and some of their definitions, many of their definitions link through to a blog. The thing they don't have in my exploration is there's certain kinds of clarity, and they're a little bit playing both sides of the I don't know how the tennis game. I don't know, both sides of the tracks, both sides here. On one hand, they have an extensive list here of 2,700 ingredients, and it includes some categories. And what I mean by that is they'll say things like they prohibit ethoxylates. Ethoxylates are chemicals that are made that the byproduct of the reaction used to make any kind of ethoxylated chemical includes 1,4-dioxin. So that kind of gets rid of that whole 1,4-dioxin thing. And then they also list certain chemicals, many of them. The one problem with 2,700 ingredients in some categories is that there's well over 100,000 ingredients. So it's difficult, excuse me, to have a comprehensive list. As you go down, I'm going to go across this whole thing on the blacklist and talk a little bit more about blacklist. So Folane says they have a blacklist, but I could not find it listed. It may be there. Just because I couldn't find it doesn't mean it's not there. Beauty Heroes does most of the stuff by categories. I found that she had done a very good job in describing the decision-making process that she used to create her blacklist. And to me, that's sort of crucial. Sephora, they had about 40, 37, 45, something like that. But there was no logic. There was no description of how they made the decision. They had, I found it very amusing. It said petrolatum is not clean unless it's USP. So the Sephora Clean seal, you're not supposed to use petrolatum, but if you use a USP, which is a quality standard, then you can have petrolatum in a clean. And I kind of felt like that was a little, I just think it's dumb. I think they could have been smarter about that. Whole Foods has over 100 ingredients, but again, they don't have any categories or logic. They don't explain how they made the decision about those 100 ingredients. Ulta, you can see in my general description, they've reported their program as having 5 pillars, maybe it's 4, but they have nothing published at this point in time other than sort of a general description of each of the pillars. One of the pillars is clean ingredients, and they have nothing listed in terms of what those clean ingredients are. It is reported that they are going to publish something in October. And it'll be interesting to see what they do and how they do that. So overall, with blacklists, you can see that they're all over the map. You know, everything from no blacklist at all to a referential blacklist that's not clear to 2,700 ingredients. To me, that's just crazy. It does not give anybody any guidance, especially if you want to meet everybody's standard when you're formulating. So the people that this is really hard on is the formulators, because people will come to them and say, I want a clean product. And the formulators in the labs don't necessarily know all these standards, and they don't necessarily know at all what the customer means by clean. They kind of guess. Or they'll ask the customer for a blacklist, and then the customers go in and they copy blacklists from various sites and send it to the labs. So this can be quite challenging if you're trying to figure out what the heck a customer wants if you're a formulating chemist or even an ingredient manufacturer. So I have a blog about blacklists too. I don't think blacklists are a good idea, chemistry is not as hard as some chemists may want us to think. There is a finite number of ways and reactions for making different chemicals. And it is really a good idea to look at that, the categories that are created by those methods used. So ethoxylates was one example I already gave you. Another one would be acrylates. Acrylates essentially make a non-biodegradable plasticized material. It's frequently used in mascara because it is plasticized and it really sticks well and it gives great definition, and it's a marvelous ingredient if you want to walk down the runway and have waterproof mascara on all day. But if you don't want to put people at risk whose career is making chemicals, it's not such a great material, and it's also something that does not biodegrade. So, those are two categories of synthesis. There's a marvelous website called sixclasses.org, and you spell out the word six. And it talks about 6 categorical, like fluorinated chemicals, the bisphenols, all that stuff. It talks about antibacterials, triclosan, things like that. So those are some of the 6 that it addresses. And they're 20 minutes each, I think, each of the 6 classes. It's a great set of background information. So that's probably enough about blacklists. Basically, I think we would be well served to talk about the choices, why we make choices about particular chemicals rather than listing out the chemicals, and look at the methods by which they're made and the safety of manufacturing and of using those ingredients. Fragrance, I know you're all really familiar with how crazy fragrance is. It was very interesting to me. Ulta, there's nothing there yet. Maybe it'll be, I'm sure it'll be on in their clean ingredient standard that they are supposedly going to put out. Whole Foods, surprisingly, I couldn't find anything that referred to fragrance. It seems to me that they ban fragrance, that you have to use a natural, but I don't think so. I think they allow fragrance. Sephora, they had this interesting, much longer paragraph than the one that I have represented here. So they basically prohibit undisclosed synthetic fragrances. And then they go on to say you can use a synthetic fragrance provided that they meet all the criteria. And then they have a list of criteria. And that's actually a pretty well-written description of how they make their decision. But it still means that the customer doesn't necessarily know what's in the product. And that's a regulatory issue. The state of California is in the process of mandating full disclosure on synthetic fragrances. And hopefully that will address some of these issues. Beauty Heroes, she requires full disclosure. Again, she did a great job at being very clear about what her criteria were. Folane, she refers to fragrances and says their synthetics are not allowed. Again, it's not specifically listed. And Credo, they have categories, which I enjoyed. I think that's an interesting approach. Fragrance-free, which actually means there are certain things you can put in as long as it's not called a fragrance under INCI, and it'll still have an aroma. So that's always a little dicey. Essential oils, certified organic fragrances, natural fragrances. They don't specify in there that it should be an ISO 9235 natural fragrance, which personally, that would be a clarification I would make. And then they have naturally derived, I don't even really know what that means, and synthetic. And they have a blacklist of specific fragrance chemicals that they do prohibit. So if you are selling through Credo, you have to give them an assurance in some form that you are not using those blacklisted fragrance chemicals. Animal testing, not a big deal because it is illegal, but I was surprised to see that most of these sites didn't note anything specific about it. The same thing with animal-derived ingredients. The Credo one was really funny, and it says no animal-derived ingredients except, and then there's these 6 that they do allow. And I think they've made this decision, you know, with some logic behind it. So it's fine. I don't have any problem with this. But I think my brain works more in a positive. So I would say animal derived ingredients allowed and list those 6, and then nothing else would be on the list. Nothing else would be allowed. GMOs and GMMs, we've talked about this a little bit. I've talked about this in other webinars. GMOs are open pollinators, and they are made from crops that require glyphosate via Roundup or some other chemical. No, there's another one, dicamba, that they're putting on open pollinators, and they're changing the genetics of the particular plant. Personally, I don't want to support that industry, so I like to know whether or not there's GMOs in there. GMMs are the yeast, the genetically modified yeast that are then fed other kinds of carbohydrate substrates, and they make interesting chemicals. And those that's what we generally refer to as biosynthesis. That may be a really valuable, important technology that we may want to use. Whole Foods has a store-wide policy about GMOs. I don't know if they have a store-wide policy about GMMs. And they may lump the whole thing in together, but they, at one point in time, and this was before Amazon bought them, they were going to require that every single brand either be certified organic or certified to the non-GMO project, or they'd have to say that it could contain GMOs if they wanted to sell there. I couldn't find anything that was specific, and that was not referred to on the whole body page where they describe their policies. I find it very interesting as we go on to this next line, petrochemicals, especially in view of what's going on with climate change right now. I did not find a ban on anybody's standard. Folane does refer to it. I actually should change that. They do refer to it, but they don't, again, they don't have a formal published standard. They have a lot of blogs. Beauty Heroes was the only one who specifically bans petrochemicals. It says, we do not allow petrochemicals. And I can't tell you how many people have gone to sell to Beauty Heroes only to discover that they had petrochemicals in their products that they were unaware of. She's done a very good job with that. And again, she's very clear, but she's been at this for a long time too, I have to say. I find it weird because in my mind, petrochemicals ultimately are environmentally destructive. And a lot of them end up being very small as they break down in our sewage systems and our water systems, even through watering plants. A lot of those materials come back because they're such small molecules. And I think they're problematic, and I think we need to have a serious conversation about where and when we allow any kind of petrochemical. Some are allowed because there's absolutely no other way to get certain molecules. Now, in this case, I'm talking about elemental chemicals like sulfur or hydrogen. Those are both byproducts of the petrochemical industry. There are alternative ways to get hydrogen. We can mine it out of the air. There's all kinds of ways we can get hydrogen. But sulfur is going to be a little more challenging. It's a very abundant chemical on the planet. There's a lot of sulfur, and it is not inherently bad. I still don't understand why people freak out about sulfates. I think what they should be freaking out about is the ethoxylates, not the sulfates. So that's one of those things where they need to have some clarity. All of them need to have some clarity, because right now, if I am a consumer and I trust a store and I don't think that they're going to, and in my mind, I don't think I want any petrochemicals, and then I go in and I buy something because I trust that clean retailer, and then I discover that there's petrochemicals in it, I think that's a problem for the industry as a whole. So I'd like some clarity there. Packaging, as everybody knows, is a huge issue right now. And I know it was weird because I didn't find a packaging thing in Beauty Heroes, but I've talked to Jeannie and I know she looks at packaging. She's pretty picky about it. And I may have just missed it. Credo does have a published policy. It's sort of a forward-looking policy because we're all still stuck with plastics. And there was nothing on any of the other sites, although supposedly Ulta, one of their pillars is going to be around packaging, sustainable packaging. But how they define sustainable is going to be anybody's best guess. Pigments is another complex material. It is one of the few things that is very, very stringently regulated by FDA. If you sell a pigment and you're using it for pigment in a cosmetic formula, it has to be registered and every lot has to be tested, and that test has to be lodged with the FDA. So there's a lot around the complexity and the chemistry of how we make pigments. So again, something that deserves a lot more attention, a lot of exploration. Biodegradability, that's kind of one of my personal hot button issues, because it goes directly to plastics, both as an ingredient and as packaging. Jeannie very clearly in Beauty Heroes had that banned. Nobody else even spoke to it. And it is a hard thing to find. A lot of people will try to find it on the SDS, and in theory, it's supposed to be on the SDS. Frequently, though, if it's a downstream, like somebody buys something and then they make their own SDS, they will say no information, even though there may be information about that particular material. But God's honest truth, an SDS is more about safety and handling. You know, if a product is on a truck and the truck crashes and there's stuff on the highway, people may be at risk. And so that SDS is supposed to be about the toxicity and the handling practices that would be best for that person handling it. Or in manufacturing, if you are manufacturing cosmetics and you're using particular chemicals, the toxicity and how it is handled for your employees is, again, an issue of concern. So biodegradability is not necessarily, although it certainly is for anything going down the drain. And a lot of things are not biodegradable. So I think it's important to, again, have those conversations. So that's just sort of my down and dirty, quick analysis. And I think I have, like a couple of major asks. One is, I think as parts of this industry, we all need to push on the retailers and on the brand. We need to push the brands to push the retailers. And we need the brands to push the formulators to be clear about these things. And whatever we can do to facilitate this, and hopefully NOBA, our little nonprofit, can help move the ball forward on this. So that's one thing, is it's just sort of being a little bit of a mouthy activist. You have to tell people what your expectation is. And if it's not clear, if you can't get the information, you have to just keep politely asking for it until you get it. I've had to ask certain chemical suppliers up to 5 times before I got full disclosure on biodegradability. My favorite thing that I ever got was one where they kept telling me that this molecule was degradable. And I can read. There's a difference between biodegradable and degradable. Degradable means a molecule will fall into different parts as it breaks down. that doesn't mean it biodegrades back to its essential molecular structure, which is what any kind of plant-derived material will do. And certain kinds of chemicals that are the results of green chemistry will biodegrade. Degradable things will sometimes, maybe 75% of it will biodegrade, and the other 25% will continue to be this non-biodegradable molecule that never leaves the planet, that didn't used to exist because we synthesized it, and it doesn't normally exist on the planet. So that's, you have to look carefully, you have to ask questions. So I would encourage a little personal activism on that point. I think the other thing is, calling these companies and saying, hey, do you have a published standard? I need to understand what I'm buying or what I'm manufacturing for. Because the more they hear that people want to see clarity, the more it will stimulate that clarity to come from their management. This is sort of old-fashioned, activism. I'm not quite sure what else we can do about it. So do you guys have questions? And I would love to hear experiences and things that you guys want, and that would help you do this kind of thing. So unmute yourselves and talk to me. There's Miriam.
Hey.
With her long hair.
I know, I've got to do something with it. So I'm looking at the Sephora category under fragrance. I'm looking at the whole fragrance category, but
yeah, it's quite a long paragraph.
So I'm just sitting out here, having been in the industry for like 29 years. And if they say undisclosed synthetic fragrances, you're saying that they're saying everything needs to be disclosed. Am I understanding that?
No, I don't think that's what they're saying at all. I think what Sephora is saying is, well, for their, yes, for their clean seal.
Oh, for the clean.
This is just for the clean seal.
Because as everybody knows, that word fragrance is the intellectual property. So if you look at that entire side wall in any Sephora of all their fine fragrance, that would require every single manufacturer to open that formula. And I don't see that happening ever.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. But for their clean program,
okay,
and Ulta, the same thing. There, is it 4 or 5 pillars? I can't remember.
Got it. So I think one of the things everybody has to be aware of, that this is my pet peeve, is that, and not to call anybody out, but you have to call it out to have the conversation. The new Henry Rose brand perfumes that were launched by lovely celebrity, forgot her name, Michelle Pfeiffer. Mm-hmm. So that brand, which was made by IFF, who I used to work for, so there's nobody's giving anybody shade, but they're launching something under this brand that is now getting so much marketing called a safe synthetic. And I think that falls squarely into your conversation of misleading information. Mm-hmm. Because a synthetic is a synthetic, and a natural is a natural, and everything should be safe if it's going to be used on skin, which is why IFRA exists. So the term safe synthetic has been directly, in my opinion, but I'm gathering so, directly an answer to the movement pushed by the market that then the manufacturer tried to meet with this very high profile client to present something to the world that can sell in a different niche category. But it has furthered the confusion, because by definition, does that mean that everything you used in the 20th century was unsafe?
Right.
So that's part of what brands or new formulators have to push and ask for. I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm calling out something.
Oh, I think the answer is green chemistry as defined by the 12 principles of green chemistry. And I go over that in the op-ed that I just put on the website. So
I'll read it.
I mean, you're right. They're confusing. They're muddying the water. So they're pushing back on synthetics are bad. Everything should be natural. And I agree. in their pushback. I don't agree with their method. I don't have a problem with synthetics. We need soap. We need surfactants. We need emulsifiers. We need preservatives. We need solubilizers. We need all of these synthetics, and it's fine as long as they're made from renewable raw materials using the 12 principles of green chemistry. Yeah, and even if they only use 10 out of 12 at this point, at least we're going in the right direction. And I think it's the obfuscation that is created by them creating a marketing campaign, and they're only looking at one issue, and her whole issue was endocrine disruption, which is not a bad concept, but it certainly could have been marketed more clearly.
Right. And I mean, if we're all trying to be so transparent, to me, that didn't really add any transparency to the conversation at all.
No.
So that's my 2 cents. I just, whoever's on the call can now be aware that that's not an answer. It's a marketing solution, but it's not the truth. And I mean, if literally right now, if any one of these large fragrance houses, whom we all love, were to stop selling petroleum-based products, they would completely cease to exist.
Yeah.
So it is an enormous conversation. So it's got to be taken step by step. And I think that's why this chart can be clearly, who did it here where they did fragrance-free. Credo, I think, is doing a good job because you can see the steps you can take.
Yeah. You know, the one thing I'd like to see them add is the ISO 9235. I'd like to define what natural fragrance is.
I agree. I agree totally.
That's a small detail.
Yeah. Okay, that's all.
So yeah, anybody else have any thoughts or concerns? I'm going to try really hard to get NOBA to sort of act on this, to somehow try and facilitate a conversation between some of these organizations. All of our members sell into these stores, and I guess I had written another blog where I talked about the sin of omission, which is kind of what you're talking about, where, you know, you only tell somebody half the truth. And I feel like that's what we do in cosmetics a great deal of the time. And that's, you know, it's not necessarily a horrible thing, but it is definitely something where we can probably do a whole lot better. And it would be a lot easier if we had shared definitions. So like green should only refer to things made using green chemistry as defined and now adopted by most of the world. You know, they've adopted those 12 principles of green chemistry. So I think we need to, you know, kind of work on that. But in any event, that's kind of all I have for today. We have recorded this. It'll be up on YouTube. And I think that's about it. We have a short one today, unless somebody else wants to chime in. So, oh, hi.
Oh, sorry, I still have a background from an earlier webinar. Excuse my virtual background. I had a question. You talked earlier, you were talking about GMOs and GMMs.
Uh-huh.
Can you did you end up having a separate webinar on that where?
We're going to for NOBA. Yes,
okay.
We have that scheduled. I think Erica,
It's going to be on the 29th of September.
September 29th. Yeah, we had to change it. Sorry.
Okay, I'll probably, I bet that will answer my question at further length. So I'll just wait for that.
It's two completely different ways of making molecules, and you know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Does the syn technology or the biosyn technology or that category?
Biosynthesis. That's what GMMs are. They're biosynthesis.
Okay, I'm fascinated to hear that you find that it's valuable, important technology. I think if I heard you right, that's what you were saying.
I do. I don't think that we have had a clear conversation about it. People are freaked out about GMOs, and I think that's when you start changing food, it is a very different thing than when you make a molecule using yeast. It's just a completely different technology. It's a completely different risk or lack thereof.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to hear. I actually had the chemist who works with our company is going to talk about this. I think mainly because her husband is he has a PhD in, oh, something totally bizarre. I can't remember. It's biological statistics or something weird like that. But I mean, it's a very specific thing. But, you know, he's sort of deep down in that world because he's at Berkeley and they're doing, they did the CRISPR and all that stuff, which just got shut down. But yeah, I think we need to learn about it. I don't want to ban something if it can be safe and if it can replace or give us a more sustainable source of an interesting and useful molecule.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I was fascinated because I think Made Safe has already banned them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but Made Safe doesn't have, again, they're an organization that doesn't have a published standard that explains the principles upon which they make decisions.
Exactly.
I deeply believe that if you cannot explain using science and academic sort of underpinnings why you make a decision, that it's purely emotional. And I don't think that any of us this is a science, you know, we are making cosmetics is chemistry and we need to respect that, I think. So I think that those clear definitions and underpinnings for why we make decisions are crucial.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to hear you say that, and I could not agree more, and I look forward to that, the 29th.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else? I think we're going to sign off. You know, it's Wednesday and we're all a little zoomed out. Although it's clear here in the Bay. Here, everybody, you can see the Golden Gate Bridge. I think. Let me see if I can. Oh, wait, I have to get rid of my, how do I fill it up with just me? I want to get rid of this. Oh, I know. I have to share my stop share. Then you get to see my messy screen there. So I think if I can do this, there it is. There's the Golden Gate, right in the middle. So it cleared up enough that we finally got it back, but it's been 2 weeks. So anyway, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm going to sign off. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, gang.